I never thought the person I loved most would be the one to betray me so deeply. He wasn't just a liar, he was a master manipulator, a smooth talker who knew exactly how to twist emotions and play the victim. He made me believe we were building a future together, all while quietly draining my savings behind my back. When I finally uncovered the truth, I was heartbroken, but I wasn't broken. He thought he got away clean. What he didn't know was that I was already planning my revenge, and this time, he'd lose more than just money. I met Aaron on a rainy Thursday afternoon at a downtown cafe where I'd gone to escape a stressful workday, and if I had known that the man holding the door open for me with a warm smile and ocean blue eyes would one day drain my savings and leave me emotionally wrecked, I might have turned around right then, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled back, thanked him, and walked straight into what would become the most dangerous lie of my life. Aaron was the kind of man who spoke with certainty, carried himself like someone who had seen pain but learned to conquer it, and made you feel like you were the only person in the room worth listening to. He had a way of reading people that felt almost psychic. Within 10 minutes, he knew about my love for vintage books, my ambition to open a wellness studio, and even the exact way I liked my coffee. It didn't take long before our casual conversations turned into long nightly phone calls, then weekend dates that felt like romantic montages pulled from an indie film. He was charming but not overly so, mysterious in just the right doses, and always just vulnerable enough to make me want to fix the broken pieces he alluded to but never fully showed. Friends warned me he moved fast, that his too-perfect persona seemed rehearsed, but I was deep in the fog of affection, too enamored to see the small red flags waving behind his perfect smile, like how he never talked about his family, changed subjects when his job was mentioned, or how he seemed to always need to borrow someone else's phone to make a call. Still, I let those doubts slide away every time he showed up with flowers, made late-night drives to bring me soup when I was sick, or told me he'd never met someone who understood him the way I did. By the third month, he was practically living in my apartment, making pancakes in my kitchen, and organizing my shelves like he belonged there. He told me he had been in a rough place financially, that a failed business venture and a manipulative ex had left him drowning in debt, and although I heard the story a dozen times, each time he added a new detail, one that tugged a little more at my empathy, that made me want to be the safe space he needed. When he asked to borrow money to cover a rent payment while he waited for a promised inheritance to clear, I hesitated, but not for long. I had the funds, and he'd done nothing but care for me with intensity, so I wired him the money. He thanked me with kisses and promises and said we were building a future together. A week later, another emergency surfaced, a frozen bank account, a missed payment, a sudden legal fee. I asked questions, but he always had answers that felt just believable enough. He used my car, my credit card just for a few days, and always said he'd pay it back as soon as everything cleared. By the time I realized I'd loaned him over $27,000, my accounts were nearly empty, my credit was damaged, and he had vanished for a business trip with no return date. His phone was off, his social media scrubbed, and every mutual friend I thought we had suddenly didn't know where he was. I spiraled. How could I have fallen for this? A man who spoke like a saint, acted like a partner, but calculated every move like a predator. I combed through old texts, voicemail snippets, receipts I hadn't thought twice about before, and it all came crashing into focus. Every kiss, every confession, every tear he'd shed in my arms had been rehearsed. He had never loved me, he loved what I could give. But heartbreak wasn't the only thing left behind. There was anger too, cold and sharp, like glass buried just beneath the skin. I decided then, I wouldn't just sit in silence while he walked away with my money and my trust. If he built a perfect lie, I would build a perfect plan. I started small, tracing his digital footprints, searching for the people he used to mention but never let me meet. I found an old Instagram tag from a wedding photo in Bali 2 years ago, and through a rabbit hole of reverse image searches and mutual followers, I discovered his real last name, one he'd never told me. That led me to a LinkedIn profile under a different first name, where he claimed to be a financial consultant with a history of tech investments, and there it was, the same face, the same blue eyes, but a whole new identity. I wasn't the first woman he'd done this to. There were at least 3 others, judging from a Reddit thread I stumbled across on a scammer warning page. One woman claimed he used her name to open a line of credit. Another said he disappeared the day after she helped him get approved for a car loan. The third had screenshots, identical texts, identical promises. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was fury. I made a burner email, posed as a potential investor for a fake cryptocurrency company, and lured him into a conversation using a name he didn't recognize. It worked. He responded quickly, eager to meet someone with fresh capital. I strung him along with doctored documents, meeting invitations, and deepfake voices I generated online to pose as an executive team. It was risky, but necessary. Each message he sent was logged, saved, and time-stamped. When I finally revealed my identity, when I sent him a voice note detailing every lie he told and every penny he owed, he didn't apologize. He blocked me. That's when I knew justice wouldn't come from him admitting guilt. I had to make sure his lies caught up with him publicly. I filed a police report, shared my evidence with the women I'd found online, and we began coordinating a digital takedown, one that exposed him through social media, legal filings, and even an anonymous tip to his supposed employer. I also hired a private investigator who discovered even more aliases, fraud reports, and women like me. Slowly, the illusion he built started to crumble. I wasn't the broken girl he left behind anymore. I was the storm coming for everything he thought he'd gotten away with. And this was just the beginning. The silence hit harder than any insult could. One day, we were laughing over cheap takeout in my apartment. The next, nothing. No texts, no calls, not even a breakup. Just a void. I checked my phone every 10 minutes for a week, convincing myself he was just busy, that maybe he lost his phone, maybe something happened. But deep down, I knew. He ghosted me. And not just emotionally, he ghosted with my money. My savings, the emergency fund I had painstakingly built over the years while working overtime shifts and skipping meals to make ends meet, was gone. We had planned a joint investment, something small to secure our future. I believed him, blindly handed him control of the account because love does that, it blinds you. I watched him study those banking apps with casual confidence, making me feel stupid for not understanding finance. He told me he'd take care of it, like a man should. I remember those words vividly now. Let me handle it, babe. You worry too much. I didn't know then I should have been worried. The night he vanished, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were racing through every detail, every moment I missed a red flag. How he never let me meet his friends, how his job always seemed too vague, how the dates started getting cheaper while the stories got grander. I remembered him joking about being a charming criminal in a past life. Maybe it wasn't a joke. I checked our joint account again. 0. My heart dropped into my stomach. I thought I would scream, but instead, I sat still, frozen, gut-wrenched, gutted. I wasn't just broke, I was broken. I kept replaying every lie, every compliment that now sounded like a con. The I love you texts were probably copied and pasted from another girl's inbox. I scrolled through old photos of us, him smiling like he had nothing to hide, me leaning into him like he was my home. I wanted to delete them, but I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to remember exactly what betrayal looked like. Days blurred together. I went to work, but I wasn't present. My manager noticed I wasn't performing well, and my friends told me I looked pale. I lied. I said I was just tired. But the truth was uglier. I was humiliated. Ashamed. How could I have been so stupid? I couldn't tell people I had been scammed by someone I once imagined marrying. Even saying it to myself sounded pathetic. But grief has a way of turning into something else, something sharper. It was a Thursday when I hit rock bottom. I sat in my apartment in my pajamas at 2 p.m., staring at an empty fridge, unpaid bills on the table, and a hollow bank account. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was war. He didn't just ghost me. He gutted me, financially and emotionally. And people like him, charmers, manipulators, emotional pickpockets, don't stop until someone stops them. That someone was going to be me. I started digging. Not into his social media, that was the surface. I went deeper. Bank traces, old emails, messages I once overlooked. I found patterns. Found a trail. He wasn't just a liar. He was methodical. A predator. He had done this before. Multiple women, same story, promises, investments, then poof, gone. I started reaching out. Quietly, carefully. At first, I didn't know what I was doing. But then, one of the women responded. Her name was Claire. She had the same haunted tone in her voice I had in my head. She told me he took $5,000 from her and disappeared. That was when I realized I wasn't alone. He made us all feel like we were the only one. It was his tactic: isolation, emotional control, financial theft. Rinse and repeat. That anger I had been bottling up started boiling. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was focused. I began documenting everything, building a case, not legal yet, but personal. I started journaling every memory, every transaction, every little detail. I wasn't sure yet what I would do with it, but it gave me clarity. He took my money, but he wouldn't take my mind. Slowly, my fear started to turn into strategy. I learned things about him he never thought I would: real name, family background, even his last location from a geotagged photo he forgot to clean. I created a burner email, reached out posing as another potential victim, and he responded. The same sweet talk, the same fake concern. He didn't even recognize the phrasing was familiar, because it was his script. That's when I knew I had him. But revenge isn't just about getting back. It's about reclaiming power. And for that, I needed patience. I started rebuilding myself silently while plotting loudly in my head. At work, I began excelling again, using every distraction as fuel. I signed up for self-defense classes, started saving again. Not because I needed protection from him physically, but to rebuild my self-worth, my sense of control. I began therapy, too. The sessions hurt, but they healed. I had to face my guilt, my shame, my inner critic who kept whispering that I deserved what happened. I didn't. None of us did. And slowly, that inner voice began to shift. I wasn't a victim. I was a witness to his crime, and now, a soldier in my own redemption. Claire and I became closer. She introduced me to another woman he scammed, and then another. We became a network, a quiet alliance of broken-hearted warriors. And together, we started sharing everything. His photos, his words, even the dates he reused. We saw how calculated he was. He had a method. But so did we now. I wasn't sure how the story would end, but one thing was clear: he underestimated the woman he left behind. He thought ghosting me meant he'd disappear without a trace. But every ghost leaves shadows, and I was learning how to follow them. The girl he gutted was gone. What was left was something far more dangerous to a man like him, a woman with nothing left to lose, and everything to expose. I never believed a trail of destruction could be traced so clearly through a keyboard until I started following his digital footprints. After weeks of silence and emotional recovery, I wiped away the last of my tears and turned to the only thing more reliable than memory: data. My ex, let's call him Rian, had been smart, calculated, and manipulative to the core. But for all his cunning, he forgot one thing: the internet never forgets. And neither would I. It began with a single notification, an old email from a bank I didn't remember signing up for. At first, I thought it was spam. But curiosity nudged me to open it, and what I saw made my stomach churn. A login alert from a device I didn't recognize, followed by an automated message about a recent wire transfer. The account had my name, my partial social security details, and even an email address linked to an old recovery phone number, one I hadn't used since I met Rian. That was the first clue. He had used my trust to gather enough data to open an account in my name, but the paper trail was digital and messy. I knew I couldn't confront him blindly. I had to build a case, layer by layer. I started with the obvious, digging into every financial app and email tied to my phone. I reset passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and downloaded transaction histories going back 2 years. What I found was both enlightening and infuriating. Rian had been transferring small amounts, $200 here, $300 there, from my linked accounts into platforms I never used. Cryptocurrency wallets, microloan services, even online casinos. Each time I questioned a strange charge, he gaslighted me with practiced ease. Maybe you subscribed to something and forgot. Are you sure you didn't make that purchase when you were drunk? At the time, I believed him. But now, armed with cold digital facts, I realized just how deep the manipulation ran. The next clue came from my cloud storage. Rian used to help me manage my digital life, backing up my files, organizing my photos, syncing my contacts. It was one of the ways he made himself indispensable. But hidden in my archived files were screenshots, yes, actual screenshots he'd taken of our bank details, login passwords, even a photo of my driver's license. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed before. My stomach turned as I realized how long this had been going on. But the more I discovered, the more empowered I felt. Every new folder I opened was another step closer to justice. I documented everything. I created a spreadsheet with timestamps, account names, IP addresses, and suspicious activity. He may have stolen my money, but I was about to steal his peace of mind. Then came the social media dive. Rian had always been careful about his online persona, keeping it squeaky clean, at least on the surface. But buried beneath his curated feed were breadcrumbs, check-ins at shady lounges, tags from friends in questionable locations, even a few suspicious comments on posts from strangers that looked far too familiar. I clicked through usernames, reverse-searched profile pictures, and found burner accounts, yes, multiple, that he used to follow crypto forums and online gambling groups. Some even had usernames suspiciously close to passwords he used with me. That's the thing about narcissists, they recycle their lies like they're invincible. But to a woman on a mission, every inconsistency is a map. I took it a step further. I reached out to a friend who worked in cybersecurity, let's call her Priya. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I shared my situation, she didn't hesitate. "Send me everything," she said. I did. Within 48 hours, Priya had traced several login attempts to a Wi-Fi network registered under his roommate's name. She found metadata in documents he'd modified on shared Google Drives, documents with my name but his financial fingerprints. And most importantly, she discovered a hidden storage account he used to hoard stolen data. He wasn't just targeting me. There were folders labeled with names I recognized, women he dated before me. This wasn't a one-off betrayal. This was a pattern. And now, I had digital evidence to prove it. Still, there was one thing missing: motive. Why would he risk everything to siphon off my money in bits and pieces? Why not just leave like most cowards do? That's when I remembered a night we spent arguing over rent. He just lost a freelance gig and looked unusually stressed. He mentioned debt, student loans, he said. But as I dug into his history, I realized he never even enrolled in college. The loans were fake, just like the life he sold me. He had been living off borrowed identities, opening fake accounts, racking up debts in other people's names, then disappearing before anyone caught on. But he stayed with me longer than the others. Why? Because I was too trusting, too stable, and too easy to manipulate. Until now. With every file I opened, I was rewriting the narrative. I was no longer the helpless ex he left behind. I was the hunter, and he was now the one exposed. I created a digital folder titled Rian's Fall and backed it up in 3 different places. I printed key documents, highlighted suspicious transactions, and filed a report with the Cybercrime Division. But I wasn't done. I needed more. So I tracked his movements through a shared calendar app we once used. He forgot to delete his end. It still pinged with reminders: crypto payout deadline, meet at Cafe Nova, update wallet. Using these hints, I visited the locations discreetly. I wasn't stalking. I was investigating. I met with a barista at one cafe who remembered him. Yeah, that guy? He's always loud, always bragging about Bitcoin and schemes. Gave me the creeps. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Rian wasn't just a manipulator, he was a predator. He targeted women with financial stability, earned their trust, stole from them, and moved on. I wasn't his first victim, but I would be his last. One night, while combing through an encrypted backup I recovered from my old phone, I found voice recordings, ones I never made. They were his. He'd recorded our conversations, likely to use them out of context later. But those files, ironically, became the final nail in his coffin. They showed intent, premeditation, and verbal proof of his manipulation. In one recording, he even bragged to a friend about how easy it was to bleed someone dry without lifting a finger. That was it. I was done gathering. It was time to strike. I met with a legal advisor and presented my case. The evidence was tight: account numbers, time-stamped transfers, voice logs, login histories, and even witness accounts. The advisor was stunned. "This is one of the most well-documented digital theft cases I've seen in a long time," he said. "We filed charges. I didn't tell Rion. I wanted him to feel safe until the hammer dropped. I changed my number, blocked him everywhere, and ghosted the ghost. I wanted him to stew in confusion, wondering why his new scams weren't working, why his favorite cafe suddenly asked too many questions, and why random people looked at him with suspicion." A few weeks later, I received a call from the cybercrime investigator. "We have him," he said. Rion had attempted to open a new crypto wallet using my credentials, again. But this time, it triggered a red flag. His IP address was flagged, and law enforcement was alerted. They raided his apartment and found devices loaded with data dumps, mine, and others. I was asked to testify. I did, with my head held high in my folder titled Rion's Fallen Hand. He looked at me with a mix of shock and panic. I was no longer the woman he tricked. I was the woman who brought him down. In that courtroom, I realized something deeper. Revenge wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming power. Every lie he told me, every dollar he stole, every moment he made me doubt myself, I used all of it to rebuild. Not just my bank balance, but my self-worth. I walked out not just with a judgment in my favor, but with my dignity restored. And Rion? He walked out in handcuffs, caught in the very web he thought he could spin forever. It started with a phone call, a voice I hadn't heard in months, sharp and familiar, belonging to Maya, my old college roommate turned cybersecurity analyst. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or ask if I was okay. She simply said, "Let's track the bastard." That's when it began, what I came to call the network, a carefully woven web of people I had once helped, trusted, or even forgotten about, now coming together for one singular purpose, justice, or something like it. Maya's tools went beyond basic searches. She traced the IP address from the fake investment site my ex, Rohan, had asked me to fund. It was cloaked under layers of VPNs and reroutes, but Maya peeled them back like paint off rotting wood. "He's using a rented virtual server in Singapore," she muttered one night, staring at the glowing matrix of digital dots on her laptop screen. I leaned over her shoulder, half in awe, half in rage. "Can we find out where he logged in from?" She smirked. "Already ahead of you." But the digital chase was only part of the plan. I needed people, real ones, to help me dig deeper. That's when I reconnected with Neil, my cousin who worked in finance and had a hobby of tracing shell companies for fun. Within days, he traced the fake business Rohan had created in my name, a consultancy that had never existed, with invoices that looked real but led to empty accounts. "He's using dummy transactions to make it look clean," Neil explained. "But if we can prove those funds were rerouted to his personal use, we have him." It was both horrifying and strangely empowering to see how Rohan had orchestrated this fraud, and even more so to watch it begin to unravel. I reached out to Sanvi, my former colleague from a marketing job I once left in frustration, who now ran a popular influencer scandal blog. "Off the record?" she asked when I pitched the idea. "For now," I replied. But once I showed her screenshots, bank trails, and call logs, her face turned stone cold. "This is a story, all right. But it's more than that, it's a pattern. You're not the first." That line hit me like ice. There were others. Other women. Other victims. Sanvi and I started tracing them, one by one, women Rohan had charmed, scammed, and ghosted. Some were too hurt to speak. Others wanted revenge just as badly. And with them, the network grew. One of them, Zoya, had a recording of him promising to flip their shared crypto account once he got her money. Another, Priya, had legal documents he'd forged to create a false joint loan. We pooled everything. My living room became a war room, laptops, printouts, red thread maps that looked like a crime documentary. Because that's what it was now. A crime. My friend Karthik, a law intern with connections to the district court records, helped me file a discreet petition requesting access to financial documents under a stolen identity clause. It was a slow grind, waiting on red tape and approvals, but when it came through, we found gold. An anonymous account linked to Rohan's number had withdrawn 3 locks from my stolen funds over 3 months. Proof. Tangible, damning proof. I could have gone to the police right then, but I wasn't done. I didn't just want justice. I wanted exposure, shame, karma. That's when the network began its final phase, visibility. Sanvi dropped the first blog post, disguised as a general awareness piece on emotional and financial fraud, but it included timelines, quotes, patterns, clearly pointing toward Rohan without naming him. The comments exploded. So did DMs. People recognized the patterns. Some sent anonymous tips. One even sent a photo of him with a new woman, another potential target. The post trended locally. Rohan was oblivious until his name started floating in whispers on social media. Meanwhile, Maya used her connections in the IT department of his company to trigger an internal security check. That alone didn't accuse him, but it flagged enough for HR to start watching. Then came the social hit. We used an anonymous account to post screenshots of his fake profiles, side by side with statements from victims. No direct name, but the digital breadcrumbs were clear. His reputation started to erode like a stone under acid rain. Clients backed off. Friends went silent. Even his Instagram followers started asking strange questions under his carefully curated posts. He messaged me once, cold, short, laced with panic. "You're making a mistake." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The network was doing the speaking for me. Zoya shared her story in a viral TikTok. Priya filed her own case. By now, the pressure was boiling. Then something unexpected happened. His ex-business partner, someone I'd never met, contacted me. "I want in," he said. "He owes me, too." He gave us the final piece, access to Rohan's old emails, where he openly bragged about flipping money from gullible investors, complete with date-stamped files. That was it. The network had come full circle. Evidence, exposure, and allies, all built from the same trust he thought he had destroyed. When I finally walked into the courtroom with my petition and folder full of evidence, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a general, walking into a battle already won. He showed up late, eyes hollow, tie loose. His lawyer whispered nervously. My statement was simple. He didn't just take my money, he built a life on lies, one woman at a time. And now, he's going to watch it burn. And burn it did. As the judge allowed the case to move to formal proceedings, as the local paper picked up Sanvi's exposé, and as his world shrank into a corner of shame, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes, it comes with facts, friends, and a network that refuses to be silent. I walked out into the sunlight, not with Rohan's apology or regret, but with the strength of every person he had underestimated. And this was just the beginning. It started with a simple message, one I knew would crawl under his skin like a tick. "Hey, long time. Need to talk." Nothing more. I left it hanging there, knowing full well he wouldn't be able to resist. Manipulators are addicted to control, and silence makes them itch. Within minutes, the typing bubble popped up, then vanished, then came back. His response, cautious but curious, read, "What's this about?" I let it sit, just long enough to make him wonder if he'd lost his grip on me forever. Then I replied with a hook so soft it sounded like vulnerability. "I need help. Can't trust anyone else." He fell for it. Of course he did. This was a man who had once looked me in the eye, wiped my tears with rehearsed tenderness, and then drained my bank account the next day. He didn't just steal my money, he stole my peace, my confidence, and months of my life I would never get back. But now, I was done licking my wounds. I had sharpened them into weapons. And the bait was the first move in a game he didn't know he was already losing. I crafted a story, one with just enough truth to keep it believable. I told him I'd gotten into a bad business deal, that someone had scammed me, that I was alone and scared, and that the money I had left was tied up in a shady crypto platform I couldn't access without help. It was poetic, really, feeding him the same kind of lie he once spoon-fed me. "You always understood systems and networks better than me," I wrote, playing into his fragile ego. "Can you help me figure it out?" He bit hard. "Of course," he replied. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." I nearly laughed. That line, almost word for word, was what he'd said to me before draining my joint account and vanishing into thin air. Now, he was about to walk into the same web he used to weave. But I wasn't going to rush it. The bait only works when the trap stays invisible. We started texting more frequently. I made sure to keep my tone just right, remorseful, hopeful, occasionally flirtatious, but always dependent. I let him think he was reeling me back in, that I still needed him, that despite everything, I somehow believed in him. And slowly, I watched him transform from guarded to greedy. He started dropping hints about meeting in person. Maybe I can take a look at your laptop. Could fix it quicker. I pretended to hesitate, then agreed, only to cancel last minute. I needed him off balance. Craving. Frustrated. Addicted to the idea of being my savior again. What he didn't know was that I had already planted tracking software on a burner device he'd be using, accessed old mutual accounts to recover deleted emails, and even reached out to an ethical hacker who owed me a favor from college. Every text, every call, every word was being recorded. Because this time, I wasn't just setting a trap, I was building a case. Then came the perfect moment. I messaged him late one night, voice trembling over the phone, telling him I'd received a strange email from someone claiming they could recover my crypto, but only if I sent them $5,000 in network access fees. I said I was afraid to trust anyone but him, that I didn't even know if it was real. He jumped at the chance. "Send it to me first," he said, too quickly. "Let me check the guy out. I'll make sure it's not another scam." There it was, the mask slipping. The hunger in his tone. He wanted to be the middleman again, the same trick he pulled before. I played along, saying I'd transfer it to his account first thing in the morning. He stayed up texting me until 2 a.m., soothing me, seducing me, reassuring me. The next day, I sent him the funds, a convincingly doctored screenshot of a bank transfer. But the account number was fake. The funds didn't exist, and while he waited for money that would never come, I was preparing the final stage of my plan. I reached out to his new girlfriend, quietly, carefully, under a pseudonym, told her I was a client he'd scammed. At first, she blocked me. I hadn't seen him in months, not in real life. Just the versions of him I remembered, the smirking, silver-tongued charmer who knew exactly how to twist sincerity into strategy. But this time, our meeting wouldn't be accidental. It would be calculated. Every moment leading up to it had been building like a quiet storm. Every move I'd made after discovering he drained my savings masked behind a calm smile and rehearsed "I'm doing great" replies to mutual friends. But beneath the surface, I was sharpening the edges of my comeback. Chapter 6 wasn't about the pain or the planning, it was about the performance. And when I say face to fake, I mean I was finally ready to stare into the eyes of the liar who wore my love like a mask and walk away with more than just closure. I wanted justice. I wanted exposure. I wanted him to finally see who he'd underestimated. The opportunity came dressed in irony, a local startup mixer organized by one of his so-called investment partners, the same people he used to name-drop when trying to impress me over red wine and lies. Through my new job, which he didn't know I had gotten through the very network he tried to isolate me from, I received an invitation. My name was there in bold, keynote guest, financial ethics in the age of personal branding. Funny, right? A lecture about ethics, with him sitting somewhere in the audience, pretending to be someone who cared. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. I made a quiet call to the event organizer, someone I'd quietly mentored over the past few months in PR, and made sure I'd be allowed to walk in unannounced. No stage, no speech, just presence. That was enough. I arrived dressed not to impress him, but to haunt him. My outfit was deliberate, confident but cold, with shades he used to say intimidated him when I wore them during arguments. The venue buzzed with eager entrepreneurs, startup enthusiasts, and digital dreamers. And there he was, standing near the bar, laughing like he had nothing to hide. The same laugh I used to think meant comfort now sounded like a rattle of emptiness. His fake network of success buzzed around him, and I knew most of their names. I had files on them, research done and late nights fueled by rage and ambition. They weren't partners. They were enablers. And tonight, they'd see the real version of the person he had buried under his manipulation. I didn't go up to him right away. That would have been easy. Instead, I made sure he saw me from across the room. Our eyes locked. He froze, mid-laugh, the color draining slightly from his face. His lips moved slowly, perhaps to confirm my name to the stranger beside him. I tilted my head, smirked, and turned back to the conversation I was having with the woman from Rise Tech Capital, the firm he once lied about pitching to. She loved my insights. I knew she'd repeat them in a room he wasn't invited into. That was the start. I didn't need revenge by yelling or calling him out in front of the crowd. That wasn't my style anymore. I needed the slow burn, the one that seeps under the skin and into the professional cracks he desperately tried to polish. So I waited until he approached me. "Hey. I didn't expect to see you here," he said, forcing a smile, trying to play casual. His voice cracked just slightly. I savored that. "Well," I replied, "you never really expected much from me, did you?" I watched his jaw twitch. "Look, I know things ended badly, but maybe this isn't the place." "You're right," I interrupted. "This isn't the place for old arguments. This is a place for new reputations." I handed him my card, not because I wanted to connect, but because I wanted him to read the title under my name, Strategic Reputation Advisor. The same field he once mocked, calling it fluff work. The irony wasn't lost on him. I watched the gears turn in his head, his eyes darting around to see who was watching. And people were watching, people who had heard rumors, seen my posts, watched me rise while he floated, directionless, through a sea of fake ventures and real debts. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "I know what you think happened. But it was more complicated." That was his favorite line, "It's more complicated." It was his shield, his get-out-of-responsibility-free card. "Not today." "Oh, I know exactly how complicated it was," I said, stepping closer. "Like how you transferred $12,437 from our joint project fund to your private account and called it a temporary hold. Or how you told your new investor I was emotionally unstable while I was busy covering your rent for 2 months. His face paled. "You kept records?" he stammered. "Of course. Unlike you, I learned from the games." His silence was delicious. But this wasn't just about confrontation, it was about control. So I walked away before he could speak again. I didn't need to hear excuses. I already had everything I needed. A week before, I had met with an investigative blogger who specialized in personal finance scandals. She had been looking for her next story, something gritty, personal, layered with deception. I gave her a sanitized version of events, one with names changed but enough detail to expose patterns of exploitation in tech startups. The day after our Mixer meeting, that article dropped like a bomb, "The Startup Sweetheart Scam, When Love and Loans Collide." It didn't name him directly, but everyone in his circle knew who it was. His inbox blew up. So did mine, with messages from women who had similar stories. Turns out, I wasn't his first mark, but I would be his last. Over the next few days, things began unraveling for him. One of his clients pulled out of a beta partnership. A mentor he had boasted about distanced himself publicly on LinkedIn. And quietly, I made sure to connect each of the pieces, ensuring that he felt the presence of my return not as an ex, but as an equal storm. That's what made it revenge. Not the shouting, not the chaos, but the clarity, the balance. Face to Fake wasn't about finally confronting the man who stole from me. It was about finally becoming the woman he could never steal from again. I had faced him, and this time, I wasn't the one pretending. The cold air in the courtroom didn't bother me, it energized me. For months, I played nice, kept quiet, and watched from the sidelines as he paraded around town like a king, pretending the money he stole was his reward for surviving heartbreak. He never expected me to fight back. He thought I was too soft, too broken, too scared. But what he didn't know was that while he was busy enjoying his victory lap, I was quietly building my arsenal. I wasn't out for just money anymore. I was out for justice, and justice had a sharp edge. It started with a single email to a financial forensic investigator. I sent him all I had: bank transfers, text messages, screenshots of him begging for help with his investment, promises of return, and even voice recordings where he admitted I owed him for the emotional toll he claimed I caused. It was disgusting, manipulative, and exactly what the legal system needed to see. The investigator worked fast. Within 2 weeks, he'd created a full report detailing how my ex had coerced, manipulated, and misrepresented his financial intentions in a clear pattern of abuse and fraud. With that, I hired a lawyer, one who specialized in economic abuse and financial manipulation in relationships. Her name was Mira, and she didn't ask for sympathy, she asked for receipts. I gave her everything. We filed the suit, civil and criminal, charging him with financial fraud, coercion, and emotional exploitation under the newly strengthened laws protecting victims of economic abuse. That day, I remember the way he laughed when he received the court summons. He called me and said, "You're going to regret this. I have screenshots too, you know. You're not innocent either." But this time, I didn't flinch. "Good," I said. "Let's put it all out there. Under oath." That's when I knew I had him. The court date was set, and the days leading up to it were filled with legal prep and emotional reckoning. Mira drilled me on everything, every transaction, every message, every phone call. We organized it all into a timeline, a crystal-clear map of deceit. His manipulation hadn't started overnight, it was systematic. It began with guilt-tripping me into helping him cover rent, then escalated to temporary loans for emergencies, followed by a fabricated business pitch that he swore would bring returns in weeks. And when I asked for updates or repayment, he spun it into emotional blackmail. "You never trusted me. You don't believe in me. If you loved me, you'd support me." Over time, I stopped asking. I started apologizing. That was his game. But not anymore. When the trial finally began, he walked in confident, wearing that smug smile like a shield. He even winked at me, like this was a performance and he was the star. But the moment Mira stood and presented the opening argument, his expression faltered. She laid out every manipulation, every. My ex's lawyer tried to dismiss it all as a relationship misunderstanding, arguing that I gave him the money willingly. But Mira was ready. Consent under coercion is not consent. Financial abuse often wears the disguise of trust. What matters is not just the money, but the manipulative context in which it was taken. We brought in experts, psychologists who testified about narcissistic financial abuse, and financial analysts who traced every rupee from my account to his investments, parties, and vacations with other women. Each exhibit was a punch, each testimony a crack in his armor. My ex tried to fight back. He took the stand and played victim. "She's obsessed," he said. "She's making this all up because I moved on. She's jealous." But then came the recordings. The ones where he admitted, in his own voice, that he didn't plan to return the money, that he deserved compensation for the emotional labor he claimed to have done during the relationship. His face turned pale as those words echoed in the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. That was the moment I saw fear in his eyes. Not fake, performative fear. Real, legal fear. The kind that creeps in when you realize you're no longer in control. The trial lasted several weeks. During that time, my ex tried everything: stalling tactics, fake apologies, even a half-hearted offer to settle things privately. But I didn't want silence money. I wanted accountability. I wanted the truth on record. Because it wasn't just about me, it was about every person who had been gaslighted into thinking being used wasn't abuse. On the final day, Mira delivered her closing statement. My client didn't just lose money, she lost trust, time, and emotional safety. But she found courage, and courage deserves justice. The courtroom was silent as the judge gave the verdict. Guilty. He was ordered to repay every rupee, plus interest, and damages for emotional and psychological distress. Even better, he now had a financial fraud record that would follow him. His job was already at risk, his reputation collapsing. But the best part? The apology he was forced to write and sign as part of the legal settlement. Not just to me, but published, officially, to show the world what he had done. For a man whose ego was his currency, that loss was priceless. As we left the courtroom, he avoided my gaze. That same man who once confidently told me no one will believe you, now couldn't meet my eyes. Mira turned to me and said, "That's what justice looks like. Not just punishment, but exposure." And she was right. Walking out of that courthouse, I didn't feel triumphant, I felt clean. Cleansed of shame, fear, and the invisible chains he had wrapped around my self-worth. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. I got my money back, yes. But more importantly, I got my story back. I was no longer the girl who got used. I was the woman who used the system he underestimated to bring him down. And this was just the beginning. It started with a single post, simple, almost harmless looking to an outsider, but it carried the weight of months of betrayal, manipulation, and deceit. The plan to expose Aiden publicly had been simmering beneath the surface ever since I discovered how deeply he had violated my trust, both emotionally and financially. After carefully collecting every receipt, every text, every voice note, every bank statement, and every falsified promise he had made under the guise of love, I was ready. But I didn't want chaos, I wanted precision. I wanted to strike where it would hurt him most: his public image, his job, and the fragile ego he used to manipulate people into trusting him. Over the months, Aiden had crafted the perfect facade: a charming entrepreneur, a so-called motivational speaker, and a self-proclaimed financial advisor who had somehow convinced people to invest not just in his schemes but in him. Behind that polished exterior was a fraud, a leech who drained women of money and emotion, then vanished, cloaked in gaslighting and silence. I wasn't going to be another forgotten victim. I wanted to be his lesson. So, I began with anonymous drops, threads on forums he frequented, subtle comments under his Instagram posts, cryptic screenshots that didn't give it all away, but just enough to raise eyebrows. My goal was not to destroy overnight but to let doubt creep in. Doubt is contagious. It spreads quietly, infecting trust. Soon enough, whispers began circulating in his circle. People started questioning his credentials, inconsistencies in his stories, his luxury lifestyle that didn't add up with the vague jobs he claimed to have. But Aiden, arrogant as ever, brushed it off, too full of himself to notice the noose tightening around his image. The second phase of my plan involved his clients, 3 of whom had reached out to me privately after I had anonymously published part of my story on a financial abuse survivor forum. They, too, had been duped by Aiden's smooth talk and business buzzwords. One woman had given him $15,000 for a crypto startup that never materialized. Another had been manipulated into signing a car lease in her name. The third, perhaps the most heartbreaking, had been promised marriage and moved across state lines only to be ghosted 3 months later, rent unpaid, her belongings still in his apartment. We united, a quiet force of women scorned and silenced, now rising together. I organized a virtual meeting with all of them, ensuring their anonymity and consent before proceeding. I was careful. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It had become about justice and warning others. Together, we built a timeline, a case, a comprehensive archive that not only painted the full picture of Aiden's manipulative pattern but also mirrored his method of operation. We weren't just telling stories, we were building a case study. Then came the hardest part: going public. I chose a Sunday night, just before his weekly Instagram Live where he lectured about financial freedom to his growing base of followers. That night, instead of logging in to watch his smug face pretend to be a guru, I hit publish. A 27-slide Instagram carousel from a new account called Truth Behind the Mask dropped with a caption that read, "This is not a hit piece. This is a documented warning." Each slide was methodically constructed. Slide 1, his photo, smiling, with a split image of the bank transfer he coerced me into making. Slide 2, the breakdown of his promises, and how they turned into excuses. Slide 3, screenshots of WhatsApp voice notes where he guilt-tripped me into giving more money. Slide 4 through 15, similar evidence from the other 3 victims. Slide 16, timeline of his lies. Slide 17, testimonials. Slide 18, explanation of financial abuse and manipulation tactics. Slide 19 through 25, legal disclaimers, identity protections, and a call to action for anyone else who may have been affected. Slide 26, audio recording of him confessing to borrowing money from multiple. Slide 27, a simple black screen with white text, "We're not staying silent anymore." Within 10 minutes, the post had over 2,000 shares. Within the hour, hashtags began trending. His comments section was flooded. By midnight, the Instagram account had reached over 18,000 followers and counting. But I wasn't done. I had timed the second wave to hit right when he'd attempt to go live. Instead of being greeted with cheers and emojis, Aiden was bombarded with comment after comment: "Thief, manipulator, you stole from me too, expose him," answered the 27 slides. He froze mid-sentence, trying to laugh it off, trying to control the narrative, but he couldn't. The internet had seen too much. His silence made him guilty. His arrogance couldn't save him this time. The next morning, articles started appearing. Bloggers, journalists, influencers who covered financial fraud stories picked it up, referencing the viral slides. People dug into his LinkedIn. Turns out most of it was fabricated. A company he said he'd founded didn't exist in any registry. Photos he posted from business events were traced to public conferences where anyone could attend. One Reddit user even found a pattern of using different last names in different cities. The final blow came when a verified account tagged the financial institution he'd lied about working for, asking for clarification. Their reply was swift and cold: "This individual has never been employed with us and is misrepresenting our brand. Legal action is being considered." Screenshots of that tweet became headlines. Aiden went dark. His Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all deleted within 48 hours. His followers turned on him. His ex-business partner, who had no idea about the full extent of Aiden's scams, released a public statement distancing himself completely. The dominoes kept falling. Clients backed out. His so-called workshops were cancelled. The shared apartment he flaunted on stories? Evicted, apparently. The lease wasn't even in his name. I watched the unraveling not with joy, but with a cold sense of closure. This wasn't revenge for the sake of drama. This was the truth returning home. But perhaps the most powerful moment came 2 weeks later. I was sitting in a cafe, quietly sipping my tea, when a young woman approached me. She recognized me from one of the anonymous voice interviews I had done after the exposure. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Thank you. I almost gave him money too. Your post saved me." That moment, more than the trending hashtags or the collapsing empire, reminded me why I started this. Manipulators thrive in silence. Aiden had used charm as a weapon and love as a leash. He thought he could erase me like he had erased others. But I didn't let him. I used his own lies as my megaphone.